Well, ladies and gents, is Tom Cruise the king of the box office? Well, if these brand new projections are anything to be believed, perhaps not. The box office for Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 has now got an adjusted projection, and that adjusted projection is $78 million. Not a massive drop-off. It was due to be projected out for $90 million, so $12 million shy of that. But it is less, and that's, interesting. Interesting. I was asked over on Twitter about this by David Cutler, and they said, do you think that it might have been the runtime? And you know what? Maybe. It's difficult to say because there's been many a long film that has come out and they've done really, really well. Right? I mean, Avatar 2 being one of them. And I actually didn't feel the runtime. So even if you sort of account for the runtime in that as speculation, I'm sure word of mouth would have got out that actually, no, you don't feel the runtime. But it is interesting nonetheless, because when you click on this as an article being pushed by Variety itself, not a lot of people... Well, it seems to be split, let's put it that way. Split down the middle. All marketing, crap story, waste of money. Some people didn't like it, some people... Yeah, I don't know. You know, lots of people seem to like it as well, just as an FYI. But it is interesting. And again, people pointing out Prime will have it in 6 months. This streaming, we go back to streaming. They've almost ruined it for themselves. But let's take a look at this. Is he the king of the box office? I don't know. I think this was a pretty decent film, to be perfectly honest. And I will say, I think it'll have legs. Mission Impossible, Fallout, as well as Top Gun Maverick, not massively comparable, but they are comparable on the respect that they weren't hugely front-loaded. And what I mean by that is they're not like a Marvel movie that comes out, or a DC movie, I'm not taking sides, I don't give a shit, that comes out and realistically it's make or break in its first weekend. These movies had legs, they carried on, they just kept going. And it could be that this has the same, exactly the same issue, is that it will just have legs. It's not like a huge opening, but it will just keep going and going and going. So let's take a look, right? Paramount's Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 is diffusing a bit at the box office. So they've had a readjusted estimate for $78 million gross. This is just domestic, by the way, over its 5-day opening. That'll be a substantial chunk behind projections headed into the weekend, which had... basically, they thought it was going to be a record breaker, $90 million. I do say, with respect to projections, a lot of it sometimes is what they want to achieve. And so some of this is actually marketing in and unto itself, is that they'll put it out there and go, it's going to be a record breaker. And so everyone goes out and books tickets because they're like, shit, I need to go and watch this film. And, they get the FOMO, fear of missing out. And sometimes they underproject it because they're like, they way underproject it so that when it does beat that, they go, it broke projections. There is an element of that in here. Some in the industry were expecting a Top Gun Maverick halo effect for Dead Reckoning after last year's Legacy sequel positively ignited movie theatres, rocketing through to the summer to become the 5th highest grossing domestic release of all time. That doesn't seem to be the case though, as Mission isn't exactly transcending the numbers typical for its franchise. It's not transcending numbers for its franchise, but it's typical of its franchise. That's not bad. That's not necessarily a bad thing. They keep making them because they actually do okay. So it's really important to keep that into perspective. So last entry, Fallout, launched with a franchise record of 61 million, which is over 3 days. And now Dead Reckoning opened up on Wednesday, plus previews Thursday evening, etc. So 5 days. But still, $78 million. That's, even if it does $78 million, that's not too bad. That's not too bad at all. It's really not. I mean, Fallout didn't just have a 3-day weekend, it had previews on Thursday, so it's a 4-day weekend, whereas Dead Reckoning is a 5-day weekend. And for it to do, what, $17 million more? It's not terrible, is it? If you're thinking about it, that's not bad. It's not bad at all. You have to adjust for inflation and the variable ticket pricing, but I honestly don't think that's terrible. So, Tom Cruise may have fostered a reputation as the global vanguard for movie theatres. I love my popcorn, he declared. But again, just to put it into perspective, right? Top Gun Maverick It had 126 million 3-day debut to $718 million finish. Mission Impossible Fallout more than tripled its opening weekend. So that's important, right? If this is playing atypical to the franchise, it doesn't actually matter that much at all. So as they'd reckon it falls behind opening estimates, the franchise will need to find those kind of legs again. But they generally always do. Now this is what's perhaps interesting, and I can't figure this out. They say that the 7th entry is the most expensive yet, but the 7th entry is split in two. The production budget ballooned to $290 million. Obviously lots of COVID and stuff like that. But I don't know if that's split for both of them, because it might be. And if it is, that's still pretty cheap, and they'll make that money back. So it's a bit difficult to really sort of say whether this is a bust for Mission Impossible. I don't think it is, FYI. I think this is playing atypical to the Mission Impossible franchise. And I think it'll do alright. You know, both Fallout, Rogue Nation, and more than 70% of their ticket sales in foreign markets, they'd reckoning has earned $82.1 million across 70 international territories through its first 3 days of release. It's not bad. It's not terrible. You know, if it crosses, I don't know, $200 million worldwide, but then it goes on to have legs, because again, you can't compare this to the likes of a Marvel or a DC film. It's comparable to other entries in the franchise, and they always tend to have legs. So, interesting stuff. We'll have to wait and see on this. I'll have another update on this tomorrow, and then potentially closing thoughts on Monday. But what do you guys think? Have you seen this film? I liked it. I thought it was well worth the price of admission. You know, you go to watch the bombastic nature of these films, and you're along for the ride. And boy, it was quite a ride. I enjoyed it. Some people have complained that it doesn't feel like a complete movie. I can completely see that, but I will say I was satisfied. I was pleased. I think it closed itself off nicely with a good sort of cliffhanger for part 2. So I'm excited to see what happens. I still don't think $78 million bad. Again, they have legs generally, like for like, based on the other entries in the franchise. Not Marvel or DC. It's not comparable to those at all. But let me know what you think down below. Love to hear it. Cheers, guys. Take care. Bye-bye now.